Hello everyone. I am Dreaming Stories and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep. So before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. I met Evan on a Tuesday night when I couldn't sleep. It wasn't anything serious, just swiping through profiles, pausing here and there when someone's face felt less curated and more human. His profile was simple, a few candid photos, some with his dog, and a bio that read, "I make a mean lasagna. Ask me about it." We started messaging that night. At first, the usual pleasantries, what we did for work, where we grew up, which shows we were binging. But somewhere around midnight, the tone shifted. We started sharing music links, laughing over bad puns, trading little pieces of our days. And it kept going. Days became a week. Then 2. Every night, we'd text until I fell asleep, phone slipping from my hand. Sometimes I'd wake up to his morning messages, "Hope work's not too awful today," or "Don't forget to eat breakfast, troublemaker." By the 3rd week, he suggested we meet in person. "Evan, I could cook for you." Proper date. My place. I hesitated, meeting someone at their house felt intimate. Risky, even. But something about Evan seemed trustworthy. His texts carried a warmth that wasn't easy to fake. And after all, I told him so much about myself already. We settled on Friday. 7 o'clock. He'd make dinner. Friday evening arrived with that subtle hum of nervous excitement I hadn't felt in years. I spent far too long picking an outfit, nice, but casual enough to not look like I was trying too hard. By the time I got in my car, the sky was melting into shades of gold and lavender. Evan's address was about 30 minutes away, tucked in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. As I drove, I imagined how it might go, the smell of baking lasagna drifting from the kitchen, music playing softly, maybe his dog nudging my hand for attention. But when I pulled into the street, something felt off. The houses here were old, tall, and spaced far apart, their yards shadowed by oak trees whose roots cracked the sidewalks. Evan's was a pale blue Victorian with peeling paint and ivy crawling up the side. Beautiful in a slightly forgotten way. His driveway was empty. No car. No lights on in the windows except for a soft glow in what looked like the dining room. I stepped out of my car, the air heavy with the smell of wet leaves. My heels crunched against the gravel path as I approached the porch. I knocked once. Then again. Silence. The faint sound of a clock ticking inside. I called his name. Nothing. I reached for the doorknob, just to test it, and it turned easily under my hand. Unlocked. Inside, the air was warm and faintly scented with something savory, tomatoes, garlic, herbs. The dining room sat directly across from the entryway, and sure enough, the table was set for 2. Plates, silverware, glasses already poured with what looked like red wine. A candle burned low between them. It was exactly as I'd pictured it. Except there was no one here. "Evan." I called, stepping inside. My voice felt too loud in the stillness. I wandered toward the kitchen. On the counter sat a cutting board dusted with crumbs of Parmesan, a knife, and, my stomach dropped, a phone. His phone. The screen was unlocked, open to our text thread. And the last few messages weren't ones I remembered sending. "Me, I'm here." Door was open. Me. I hadn't typed those. My own phone was still in my pocket. A chill crawled up my spine. A sound broke the silence. A single creak. From upstairs. I froze, every nerve in my body taut. The sound was slow, deliberate, not the random groan of old wood, but the weight of a foot pressing down. Someone was here. My first instinct was to call out again, to assume maybe Evan had just been upstairs getting something. But something about the stillness in this house told me not to. Instead, I moved quietly toward the staircase, peering up. The hall above was dark except for a strip of light bleeding from a doorway halfway down. Another creak. I backed up instinctively, my breath catching. My mind was already building possibilities. Evan, sure. Or maybe a roommate. But why hadn't they answered? And why were there texts I never sent on his phone? My hand slipped into my pocket, gripping my phone. I debated calling the police, but the absurdity of explaining, "I'm at a date's house and it's weird," made me hesitate. That hesitation cost me. Because the footsteps started again. Slow. Closer. A shadow crossed the strip of light in the upstairs hall. Not Evan's. At least, not the way I'd imagined him. This shape was too tall, too broad. It moved differently, with a kind of heavy slowness, like it was dragging one foot. I backed toward the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. My heel hit the rug in the entryway, making it slide slightly under me. The candle on the table flickered, casting warped shadows across the wall. Then, silence again. Whoever was up there had stopped. I couldn't tell if they were listening for me, or if they'd turned away. I reached for the doorknob, twisting it slowly, praying it wouldn't squeak. But as I pulled, something on the table caught my eye. 2 folded slips of paper, one on each plate. Mine had my name written on it. Against every instinct screaming leave, I snatched the paper and unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, precise. "You came. Good. Don't leave." A rush of cold washed through me. I looked at the second note, still folded neatly on the opposite plate. My hand trembled as I reached for it. "He'll be here soon." My stomach lurched. Who was he? Wasn't Evan supposed to be here already? I shoved both notes into my pocket, yanked the door open, and stepped onto the porch. My car sat right where I'd left it, the quiet street unchanged. I should have just run to it. Gotten in. Left. But the sound that came next froze me in place. Not footsteps. Not movement. A voice. From the upstairs window. Low, almost a whisper. "Don't go." The voice was almost lost in the night air, but it was enough to stop me mid-step. I looked up. One of the upstairs windows was open, the curtain billowing faintly. I couldn't see anyone, but I knew the voice had come from there. "Evan." I called, my voice sharper than I intended. No answer. A prickle of dread crawled over my skin. The smart thing, the only thing, was to get into my car and leave. But curiosity has a way of rooting you in place, even when your body is screaming to run. I stepped backward toward the driveway, keeping my eyes on the house. The open window stared down at me like a blank eye. And then, the curtain stopped moving. Something, or someone, had stepped in front of it. That was the final push I needed. I turned, heading for my car, my heart in my throat. But as I reached for the door handle, headlights swept across the street. A dark sedan slowed in front of the house and pulled into the driveway beside me. My hand froze on the door handle. The car door opened. A man stepped out. Not tall, not broad, average in almost every way. Worn hoodie, jeans, hair a little messy. He looked like the pictures I'd seen, though slightly older, more tired. "Evan," I said, my voice half relieved, half accusing. He glanced at me, confused. "Hey. You're early." I blinked. "It's 7:15. He frowned, pulling his phone from his pocket, his phone, not the one on the counter inside. "I thought we said 8. I just got off work." For a moment, I thought about telling him everything, the unlocked door, the table, the notes, the footsteps. But some instinct held me back. Instead, I just said, the door was unlocked. I thought you were inside. He looked genuinely surprised. Unlocked? That's weird. I followed him up the steps reluctantly, my muscles still tense. When he pushed the door open, everything inside was exactly as I'd left it. Table set. Candle flickering. Except the phone on the counter was gone. I scanned the kitchen quickly. Did you leave your phone here earlier? No, he said, tossing his hoodie onto a chair. Mine's right here. He held it up. Something in my voice must have betrayed me, because Evan's expression shifted from casual confusion to something sharper. What happened? He asked. I hesitated, then told him, most of it, anyway. Not the notes. Not yet. Just the unlocked door, the footsteps, the shadow upstairs. His face paled. I don't. I live alone. We stood there for a moment, both listening. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the fridge. Evan grabbed a baseball bat from behind the pantry door. Stay here, he said. Of course, I didn't. We climbed the stairs together, his grip tight on the bat. The hallway was darker now, the strip of light from the room at the end gone. He nudged the first door open with his foot, empty bedroom. The second, a bathroom. When we reached the last door, he hesitated. Then pushed it open. The room was bare. No bed, no furniture, just dusty wooden floors and a single open window. The curtain swayed slightly in the breeze. Evan stepped inside, looking around. I don't get it. No one's been in here for months. I moved toward the window. From here, I could see the porch roof and the street below. If someone had been standing here, they could have leaned out and whispered. I turned back to Evan. The light was on before. He shook his head. There's no bulb. We went back downstairs. I headed for the table, telling myself I'd show him the notes. Prove I wasn't imagining things. But they were gone. Both plates were still there. The candle still burned low. But the slips of paper I'd shoved into my pocket earlier, gone. I checked again, panic rising. My pockets were empty. Evan noticed my face. What is it? I shook my head. Nothing. Because how was I supposed to explain that something I'd physically taken with me had vanished? We ate dinner, though neither of us had much appetite. I kept glancing at the windows, half expecting to see a face staring in. Halfway through, Evan's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, then froze. What is it? I asked. He turned the phone toward me. It was a text. From my number. Me, I told you not to go. The timestamp was 6:42 p.m., before he'd even arrived home. For a moment, neither of us moved. The little gray speech bubble on his phone stared back at me like an accusation. My name above the message. My number. My words, except they weren't mine. That's not from me, I said, my voice thin. Evan looked between me and the screen, his jaw tightening. Then who else has your phone? No one, I said immediately, pulling it from my pocket and shoving it toward him. It's been on me the whole time. He checked the timestamp again, then looked at my phone. The message wasn't in my sent folder. Not in my drafts. Not anywhere. Could someone have spoofed your number? He asked. I gave a helpless shrug. I guess. But why? And why that? We sat in silence for a long moment, the sound of the clock in the hall ticking far too loudly. Then it came again. That slow, deliberate creak. Upstairs. I froze, locking eyes with Evan. His grip tightened on the bat still leaning against the wall from earlier. Without speaking, we both rose. The air in the house felt heavier now, like it was holding its breath. We climbed the stairs together, slower this time, listening between each step. At the top, the hall yawned into shadow. The last door, the one with the open window, stood half shut now. Evan pushed it open in one sharp motion. Empty. The curtain hung still. We turned to leave, and that's when I saw it. A narrow dresser against the far wall that hadn't been there earlier. Its surface was coated with a thin layer of dust, except for one drawer, the second from the top, where the dust had been disturbed. Something inside me knew we shouldn't open it. But my hand moved anyway. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Some old, their edges curling. Others sharp and glossy, printed recently. And in every single one, someone was asleep. Different people, different bedrooms, all lit by the sickly yellow glow of a camera flash. Some looked terrified even in sleep, their brows furrowed. Near the bottom of the stack, I saw a familiar duvet cover. A string of fairy lights along the headboard. My bedroom. My face. Sleeping. My legs nearly gave out. This is, Evan, this is me. He stared at the photo, his knuckles white around the back. When was this taken? I don't know. My voice broke. I lock my doors. Always. There was a sound behind us, the faintest scrape, like fabric brushing wood. Evan turned, swinging the bat. Nothing. But the door to the hallway was closing, inch by inch. We lunged for it, but before we could reach it, the heavy slam shook the walls. Evan rattled the doorknob, locked from the outside. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air staler. I backed toward the window, yanking it open. The drop wasn't far, maybe 8 feet to the porch roof, but the darkness below felt bottomless. Evan looked at me. We go now. I climbed onto the ledge, the wind biting against my face. He followed. We dropped onto the porch roof, the old wood groaning under our weight. From here, we could see the side yard stretching into shadow. We slid down the sloped roof, landing hard in the damp grass. My hand stung from the impact, but I didn't stop moving. We cut toward the back fence, Evan pulling me along. Behind us, a light flicked on upstairs, the window we'd just climbed out of. A figure stood there now. Too far to see the face, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Tall. Broad. Still. Watching. We scaled the fence and landed in the neighbor's yard. Their house was dark, but Evan pounded on the back door until a porch light flicked on. An older man peered out, startled at the sight of us. Evan's voice was urgent, shaking. Call the police. Now. The man didn't ask questions. As he disappeared inside, I looked back once more. The figure in the window was gone. The police came, searched the house, and found nothing. No one. The upstairs room, they said, was empty. No dresser. No photographs. When they asked why we'd been there, Evan and I shared a glance. I wasn't sure which part sounded more insane, that I'd been invited for dinner by someone who might not even have been Evan, or that the house itself felt like it had been shifting around us. They took our statements and left. I haven't been back to that street since. But sometimes, late at night, I'll wake to the sound of a camera shutter in the dark. And in the morning, I'll find a note on my nightstand. Always the same words. Don't leave. I didn't sleep the night after the police left. Every shadow in my room felt too solid, every creak of my apartment settling too intentional. I kept glancing at the curtains, half expecting them to twitch. My phone lay face up on the nightstand, screen dark, but I checked it every few minutes anyway, as if catching a message in real time would somehow make it less frightening. By morning, my body felt like it had been carved out of stone. Evan texted first. "Evan, you okay?" Me. We agreed to keep in touch, partly out of shared paranoia, partly because no one else could understand exactly what we'd experienced. 3 nights later, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. The sound was faint, so faint I almost convinced myself it wasn't real. A soft tap, 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 like fingernails on glass. I turned toward the window. A silhouette stood outside, just beyond the reach of the streetlight. Too dark to see a face, but I knew, instinctively, that they were watching me. I couldn't move. My body felt pinned beneath my own heartbeat. The tapping stopped. A shadow shifted away from the glass. And then, almost tenderly, something slid under the window frame from the outside, a folded piece of paper. I didn't open it until morning. It was the same neat handwriting as before. "You'll get used to it." When I told Evan, he went quiet for a long time. "I got one too," he finally said. His had been taped to his bathroom mirror. "You came. Good." We started comparing notes, literally. Each one was short, the handwriting identical, and always appeared without us hearing anyone enter. After the 3rd incident, Evan suggested staying at my place for a few nights. It wasn't romantic. We just didn't want to be alone. On the 2nd night, I woke to footsteps. Not outside. Not upstairs. In my hallway. Evan was already sitting up on the couch, his eyes locked on the darkened corridor leading to the bedrooms. Neither of us spoke. The steps stopped right at the threshold. I could feel it, that sense of someone just beyond the dark, watching. Then, the sound of paper tearing. A small square drifted into view, landing on the hardwood. Evan picked it up slowly, holding it so I could read. "He'll be here soon." The next morning, I found something tucked under my pillow. A photograph. Me, sleeping, from the night before. Evan swore he hadn't taken it. His hands shook as he looked at it, like he wanted to believe I was accusing him just so there'd be a human explanation. But we both knew better. Over the next 2 weeks, the visits became organized. Every 3rd night, like clockwork. Always between 3:10 and 3:20 a.m. Sometimes just a note. Sometimes a photograph. Sometimes nothing but the sound of someone breathing near the foot of the bed. And sometimes, in the mornings after, I'd check my phone and see messages to Evan I hadn't sent. Once, I woke to my own voice on a recording, a voicemail I had no memory of making. I was whispering. "Don't go." I told Evan I couldn't keep living like this. We talked about moving, changing numbers, even going to the police again. But every plan felt flimsy, like we were trying to escape smoke. Then, last night, a new note appeared on my kitchen table. No paper this time, just 3 words scrawled directly into the wood, carved deep enough to splinter. "Come back home." And I think I know exactly which house they mean. Evan didn't like the idea any more than I did, but when I showed him the carving, his face went pale in a way that told me he'd seen something similar. He pulled a crumpled slip of paper from his jacket pocket, one I hadn't seen before. "Come back. Both of you." The handwriting was the same. That was enough to settle it. Not because we wanted to, but because it felt inevitable. Like the longer we avoided the house, the closer whatever it was would get. We agreed to go together. Daylight. No splitting up. We drove in silence, both watching the road like it might suddenly spit the house out at us. The closer we got, the more the world seemed to slow down, the trees leaning a little too far over the road, the air thickening with that damp leaf smell from my first visit. When we turned onto the street, my breath caught. The pale blue Victorian was still there, but different. The ivy was gone, the peeling paint replaced with a fresh coat. Curtains hung neatly in every window. The driveway was full, not just one car, but 3. It looked lived in. Evan parked across the street. "Are we sure this is the right place?" I whispered. He didn't answer. His hands were gripping the steering wheel hard enough to whiten the knuckles. We crossed the street slowly, our footsteps crunching over gravel. I half expected the porch to creak the way it had before, but the boards were new, smooth. Evan knocked. A woman answered. Mid-40s, cardigan, hair pulled into a loose bun. She smiled politely. "Can I help you?" Evan began, "Sorry to bother you, but, how long have you lived here?" She tilted her head. "Since I was a kid. My parents left it to me." I felt my stomach flip. It wasn't empty recently. Her smile faltered just slightly. "No. Never." Before we could thank her and leave, she stepped back. "You look pale. Do you want to come in for some water?" Every fiber of me screamed no. But Evan, perhaps out of politeness or curiosity, nodded. We stepped into a warm, well-lit home. The smell of baking bread filled the air. The walls were lined with family photos, most of them old, the same woman as a teenager, a younger man beside her, 2 children. It was the opposite of the house we'd been in before. And yet, as we followed her toward the kitchen, I caught sight of the dining room table. Set for 2. Wine glasses. A single candle, unlit. And 2 folded notes on the plates. I stopped in the doorway, my pulse in my throat. The woman noticed. "Something wrong?" Evan's voice was thin. We have to go." She looked between us, smiling again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh. Don't leave." Her voice was lower now. Familiar. I realized where I'd heard it before. The upstairs window. We backed toward the door, but the house was already changing. The warm yellow light dimmed to that same sickly hue I remembered. The photos on the wall blurred, faces smearing into gray smudges. The smell of bread curdled into something sour. And from somewhere upstairs, slow, dragging footsteps began to move toward the landing. The woman didn't follow us. She just stood in the kitchen doorway, watching, as the steps grew louder. Evan grabbed my hand. "Run." We didn't look back. We burst through the front door, the sound of it slamming behind us swallowed by a heavy, unnatural silence. The street was gone. Not empty, gone. In its place stretched a long, narrow road lined with houses that weren't from our time. Dark wooden facades leaned toward the street, their windows shuttered or black. No cars. No streetlights. Just an endless, dim twilight that didn't match the bright afternoon we'd arrived in. My breath came fast. Where's my car?" Evan scanned the road, his voice tight. "It's not here. None of this is here." We didn't have time to process it. The dragging footsteps from inside had moved to the porch. The woman stood there, but she was different now, taller, thinner, her cardigan hanging like wet cloth. Her face had no features, just a smooth stretch of skin. And behind her, silhouetted in the dark entryway, was another figure. Broader. Motionless. Watching. Evan grabbed my arm, pulling me down the street. My shoes slapped against cobblestone now, not asphalt. The air felt heavy, damp, each breath like inhaling through a wet cloth. We ran past house after house, every one looking nearly identical. No people. No sounds except our footfalls. Pick one. Evan panted, gesturing at the rows of doors. I shook my head. They're all the same. Then I saw it, an open door, faint light flickering inside. Without thinking, I darted toward it. Inside was a dining room. Set for two. The plates were the same as before. The wine glasses. The candle, lit now, burning low. And on my plate, a folded note. I didn't want to touch it. I really didn't. But my hand moved anyway. Stop running. You're home. Evan's voice cracked behind me. We need to leave. Now. We turned to the doorway, and froze. The street outside was gone. Instead, a staircase rose into darkness, the steps creaking under the weight of someone coming down. It was wrong, utterly wrong, because the sound was above us, but the air around my ankles stirred like something was moving below. The figure emerged slowly, one foot dragging, one hand trailing along the wall. Broad shoulders. Tall frame. And in its other hand, a camera. The flash went off. For an instant, I saw Evan's face lit up in stark white, his eyes wide, his mouth forming my name. Then the darkness swallowed us again. The flash seemed to burn in my eyes longer than it should have. I was sitting in a chair. The air was cold, too cold, my breath fogging slightly as I exhaled. The walls around me were white, not painted, but bare plaster, uneven and cracked. The only furniture in the room was the chair I was in and a single table against the far wall. On the table, a stack of photographs. The sound of shuffling footsteps came from somewhere behind me. I turned, and nearly choked on my breath. An entire wall was covered in photos. Hundreds of them, pinned in uneven rows, overlapping in places. They were all of me. Some old, from years ago. Me walking to my car. Me leaving work. Me sitting in my apartment with the curtains half drawn. And at the center of the wall, the newest one, me standing in the doorway of the dining room just before the flash. I stumbled to my feet, my legs shaking. Evan. No answer. Then I saw the opposite wall. His photos. Evan, in different moments. Working on his car. Buying groceries. Sitting at his kitchen table. The newest one, him, frozen mid-step, looking at me in the flash. We'd been collected. The shuffling grew louder until it was right behind me. I turned slowly, my back pressed to the wall of photos. A tall, broad figure stood in the doorway. The camera hung from their neck, swaying slightly. When they spoke, the voice was low, patient, almost gentle. You came back. I swallowed hard, my voice barely audible. What do you want? The figure tilted their head. We've been waiting. You belong here now. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement, another figure entering behind them. Shorter. Slighter. It was the woman from the house. She was holding two blank picture frames. They set them down on the table. Side by side. Waiting to be filled. The woman looked at me, her face expressionless. Sit. My legs refused to move, but the man with the camera took one slow step forward. The floor groaned under his weight. Evan's voice came from somewhere beyond the doorway. Don't let them. It was cut off with a sharp crack, like wood splintering. The man lifted the camera. I didn't think, I lunged toward the table, grabbing the stack of photographs and flinging them into his face. They scattered like snow, the glossy paper catching the dim light. Evan's shadow appeared in the doorway, and together we shoved past the two figures, the frames clattering to the floor. The hallway beyond was narrow, stretching endlessly in both directions. No windows. No doors, except for one at the far end, slightly ajar. We ran. Our footsteps pounded in unison, the hallway vibrating faintly under us, like we were running on something alive. The door at the end was half. Go! Evan barked, his voice hoarse. I shoved it open and stumbled through, and stopped dead. We were back in the dining room. Not the warm, lived-in version. Not the dusty, abandoned one. This was wrong. The room was dim, lit only by a single candle in the center of the table. The shadows it cast clung to the corners like oil. The table was set again, but now for 3. 3 plates. 3 glasses of red wine. 3 folded notes. 1 in front of my chair. 1 in front of Evan's. 1 in front of the empty seat between us. I didn't want to open mine. Every part of me screamed not to. Evan was already unfolding his. His hands were trembling, but his voice was steady when he read it aloud. You stay. She goes. My stomach nodded. I reached for my own note with numb fingers. You go. He stays. I looked at Evan. His eyes were fixed on the 3rd note. Neither of us touched it. From the shadows behind the empty chair, the tall figure stepped forward. The woman followed, her hands resting on the chair's back. The man with the camera set it on the table, the lens pointed at us. The woman's voice was soft, almost coaxing. Only one of you has to leave. Evan shook his head. We're both leaving. The man tilted his head, slow and deliberate. That's not how it works. The candle's flame wavered, as though a breath had passed over it. The shadows on the walls seemed to lean closer. The woman slid the 3rd note toward the center of the table. Read it. Evan's hand shot out before I could stop him. He unfolded it and frowned. Choose. Or we will. Something shifted in the air, a deep, subtle thrum that vibrated in my chest. I realized then that we weren't deciding who escaped. We were deciding who stayed here. Forever. And from the way the man was watching us, camera poised, I knew they already had a preference. Evan's jaw tightened, and I could see the decision forming in his eyes, the one I didn't want him to make. I shook my head quickly. No. We don't choose. We don't play. The woman's face didn't change, but the man leaned forward slightly, his shadow stretching across the table until it swallowed my note whole. You will, he said softly. Everyone does. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the floor like a scream. Not us. Before the man could move, I grabbed the candle from the center of the table and hurled it toward the wall. Wax spattered and the tiny flame went out instantly, plunging the room into darkness. I heard Evan shove his chair back and the sound of glass shattering, maybe one of the wine glasses, maybe the camera. The man snarled, a deep, guttural sound that didn't sound entirely human. The woman hissed something sharp in a language I didn't recognize. Evan's hand found mine in the dark. Move. We ran, but the door we came through was gone. Instead, the dining room just kept going. The table stretched on endlessly in the dark, place setting after place setting flickering into sight with each step, like we were running along the same loop over and over. And in each new setting, the folded notes were already opened, the words inside written in the same precise hand. You belong. I spotted a flicker of light off to the left, not a candle, but something sharper, cleaner. A door. Without thinking, I yanked Evan toward it. The handle burned hot against my palm, but I forced it open. We stumbled through into a blinding white glare, and found ourselves in the hallway from before, the one lined with our photographs. Only now, the frames weren't empty. They were filled with pictures of us sitting at the table. And in every one, there was a third person sitting between us. Someone I didn't remember seeing. At first, the third figure in the photographs was just a shadow, blurred, faceless. But the more I stared, the sharper it became. A head tilted toward me, lips curled into the faintest smile. My stomach twisted. "Evan, look." He leaned closer, and I felt the moment it hit him, the stiffness in his shoulders, the sudden sharp breath. Because the face was mine. A sound rose behind us, soft at first, like the whir of a camera winding film. Then the click of a shutter. I spun around. We weren't in a hallway anymore. We were sitting at the table. The candle was lit again, its flame steady. The wine glasses were full. Our notes were in front of us. And between us sat the third version of me, flesh and bone, smiling faintly. Her hand rested on the camera in the center of the table. She leaned forward, her voice exactly like mine. "You never had a choice. You never left." I shook my head, backing away, but there was nowhere to go. The room had no walls now, only darkness beyond the edge of the table. Evan gripped my arm. "Don't look at her." But my other self was already lifting the camera. "Smile," she said. The flash went off. When my vision cleared, I was standing. Alone. A wall loomed in front of me, covered in photographs, but this time, none of them were of me. They were all of Evan. And in the newest one, he was sitting at the table, alone. The chair beside him was empty. I turned, and my breath caught. The wall behind me was bare, except for a single empty frame. My frame. From the darkness, a folded slip of paper slid toward my feet. I didn't want to pick it up. I knew it would be the last thing I'd ever read. But my hands moved on their own. The handwriting was neat. Precise. "Don't leave." The candlelight flared somewhere behind me. A chair scraped across the floor. And a voice, my own, whispered in my ear. "Your turn."